Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Monday, February 26, 2024. Time for another show. Time for another one in which I forget to turn the air filter off. I'll get to that in just a minute. No problem. Just a little bit of a dull roar in the background. But we have such fresh air here. So we got that to thank for it. Although now we're going to move to a more silent version of the air purifier at some point. There was never one down here before. I don't know why I'm explaining this, except that the noise is going on in the background. There was never one down here. This one was upstairs making large amounts of noise upstairs in the bedrooms, and we got silent ones for in there where it makes that much more sense. And then we have this one. So I said, hey, we'll put it down here and we'll purify air. You know what? We should just put it outside. Purify everything. But anyway, it'll shortly be replaced by silent units that will never cause this problem again. But thank you to the local production staff on hand, because it's a Monday, for taking care of that. This is generally what I do. You don't care about it when you tune in for the news. But if I start making it your issue, it really makes an issue here this way. Everybody hears and says, he's complaining about the stupid air purifier again. I'll take care of it. I could just do that on the air and make the, why not? Lots of noise rattling around, speaking to you from a distance from the microphone, just as interesting. And Tuesday through Thursday on this program, we'll be doing just that. Okay, other things to catch up with. There was news and stuff all weekend, although honestly, Blue Sky news feed, it is really not at the level that Twitter once was. Twitter is a big loss. I mean, I don't think it credits Elon Musk at all to say that Twitter's been more or less destroyed as my go-to news source for most things. But, okay, it was a good place at one point, and he bought it, and now he owns it, and he can walk around saying, I owned, briefly, an awesome place. But yeah, most of the blue sky discourse for my feed, and that's really my own fault for curating my feed this way, I guess, was mostly about people either yelling at, is it Taylor Lorenz, who conducted this interview with libs of TikTok lunatic Chaya Raichik, and by most accounts actually did a pretty good job of doing it, but there was a big fight over, well, you shouldn't interview someone like that. Don't platform them. And then people yelling at people saying, why do you say things like don't platform them? You can't just ignore them and they go away. It doesn't work like that, and you need to show people. So, philosophical differences. Meta is what occupied most people's minds in my feed over the weekend, and that wasn't really all that super interesting or super productive from my point of view. Luckily, Greg has been collecting news stories from over the weekend. As it happens, there was like a big political story, sort of, in the sense that a primary occurred, and it was South Carolina, and we were all told, a couple of years ago, well, that's going to be one of the big ones now. An early state, much more diverse, and it's going to determine the path forward. But, it wasn't anticipating this idea of having essentially two incumbents running against one another with no doubt about the outcome. But, there's stories because people voted, and it came out like everyone expected it to come out in terms of who won. And even probably according to the numbers, I mean, Nickki Haley's not going anywhere, but she was the governor of South Carolina, so that's where you would expect her to do her best. And she did, holding Donald Trump to under 60%, just slightly under 60% of the vote, which, it's a win. So, not that he's worried about it in his camp or anything. What was interesting, people were pointing out, of course, Joe Biden, of course, also, I guess, has been winning his primaries. And for some reason, everybody's like, well, yeah, but he's also very old. And so therefore, something is very wrong. Something's going crazy about nominating him, and we're just not sure. And maybe there should be a brokered convention. He's winning like 95, 96, 97 plus percent of the vote because there's just no competition, serious or otherwise. There are other people running. They're just nobody is interested in them. And then over in the Republican Party, there's a whole Never Trumper section, and Nickki Haley's still in it, and they were in her state, and he's held to under 60%, and that's actually a pretty serious underperformance. And yet somehow the write-ups are, Trump clobbers all his competition. Here's his, why he's on the march to victory. Biden, who got 90-something plus percent of the vote, well, he is very old, so let's talk about that. So that was kind of interesting. Certainly, Greg will be rounding that up and was probably annoyed and frustrated by that to some extent. And then the tips from Justice this morning. Elon Musk is a bigger jerk than I was saying just for having ruined things on Twitter. He also apparently has ruined satellite communications around the world. You know that one of his many companies, one of his couple of companies, a handful of companies that he owns and operates do things. And people know what they are. Like Teslas, the cars, you see them all over the road. There's dispute about how much he had to do with the actual invention of the vehicle or design or what have you. But he's well known to be associated with the company. Those cars exist. They're, in some cases garbage, but they exist. Everybody sees them. SpaceX has its problems, but it launches vehicles into space. People see it. The tunnel thing, well, all right, that seems like kind of a joke. And then, lastly, there's the Starlink. Is that the name of it? Or you know what? I can't even keep up with the name of it. But the satellite communications. And that's been an issue of late, too, when he is, and this is one of the problems with having multi-billionaires controlling everything like global communications. You got this one lunatic who can turn it on and turn it off, and apparently he holds a contract with the United States government to supply the satellite communications for U.S. troops stationed in Taiwan. Never forget Taiwan. They keep trying to sneak it into the supplementary aid bill. And apparently, I guess you and I are paying him. Not you Canadians. You aren't paying him. Not from this. But paying him to maintain this communications link, and he's saying maybe I just won't be doing that. And I don't know how that's going to shake out. But we've got a lot of things to try to figure out how they're going to shake out. Impeachments, government shutdowns, and Greg's turn on the microphone. I say we go to him right now. Good morning, Greg.
Good morning.
Hey. How's the first 15 minutes of the show for you so far? Pretty restful, I think.
Yeah, but, you wind up bringing a lot of important points, how it's important to purify the party, like Michigan is doing.
Right. I need a purifier for them.
Yeah.
That makes less noise.
Process purification.
Yes.
I got one for you. I'm going to do this now simply because if I don't, I'll forget. Because
okay.
I'm not Biden, but these things happen. Representative Brian Fitzpatrick, Republican, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Quote, we have a bipartisan bill. He's trying to get Ukraine money plus maybe a little on the border as well. In other words, he's trying to resurrect what the Senate did.
Okay.
It's the only one in the House. And as of Friday, we have filed with the clerk expedited consideration. And he's talking about a discharge petition.
Okay.
Normally, any kind of discharge like that would be 30 days. This is where it's interesting. Okay,
yeah, I don't know if it's expedited.
You'll understand, and I won't. To even be considered, but we figured out a way with the parliamentarian to expedite that to 7 days. That's what told the news media.
Okay. Will beat you up if you don't?
That's what it was. No, he didn't.
Oh, all right.
But he's going to introduce something that he says will be able to bring an expedited discharge petition, or as they say on the floor, he'll make it ripe. In a week.
I guess.
What happens in a week? Then people can start signing on. You can start signing your names. And then when you get enough votes, enough signatures,
yes.
I guess what do? You present it to the speaker, the parliamentarian, you present it to like the Boy Scouts. I don't know what you do. Somehow or other magically you get a vote on it.
You're not allowed to do anything. It's some people thought it was self-executing, but the Supreme Court says no, it just sits there and you don't have standing to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a procedure, but it's
right.
rare.
And
so I don't
unlike the defeat the previous question, which is also a relatively fast way compared to the normal discharge petition, You don't have to look for something germane to attach it to. You just do it.
Yeah. You can, just charge your own, whatever you want. Standalone bill, omnibus bill if you feel like it, if you've got one put together. It can be single subject, multi-subject, doesn't matter. And you don't have to wait for the rules committee either, because you get direct access.
Right, so something's coming, and we'll see what happens. And that's sort of important because it's going to affect a whole lot of things. I mean, there's a big difference in Joe Biden's campaign if he could get stuff done, like, a ceasefire in the Middle East and Ukraine money out of Congress and, maybe get past the coming partial shutdown and blame the Republicans, So,
That'd be nice.
Again, there's a whole lot of reasons not to pay too much attention to polling right now. But just the things I mentioned are going to change the equation.
Yes. Okay.
Now, but nothing changes the equation for the Republicans. I'm not talking about the Republicans. I'm talking about normal people.
All right. Yeah, they have their equations changed all the time.
Right. And speaking of equation change, let's do this in reverse order. Coming up tomorrow is part one of the Michigan primary.
Part one.
Part
Yeah.
one.
Okay.
Because the
You mentioned it
Republicans,
being crazy.
unlike the Democrats,
What?
are not simply going to have a Michigan primary tomorrow. Democrats are going to have a Michigan primary, and then you decide where the delegates go. I think there's something like
straightforward.
140 at stake or something like that, and whoever gets the most votes gets the most delegates, but it's proportional. That's not how
crazy.
the Republicans do it at all.
No, of course not. Why would you do that?
Well, you see, the Republican national rules say that except for a few carve-outs like Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, the traditional go first states, everybody else has to do their thing after March 1st,
No.
which is Friday.
Okay.
Okay. So what the Republicans did is say, well, we're not going to move stuff just because Democrats are interested in screwing things up and getting rid of the white people in Iowa and the white people in New Hampshire and trying to bring black people in South Carolina into the equation. We don't have to go along with that.
Oh, well, no, they wouldn't want to.
However, Michigan is a blue state right now. Yeah, you can call it a purple state in terms of how it votes, but Gretchen Whitmer's the governor, and it's got enough legislative oomph to change things if they want, and they did.
Well, all
So
right.
they moved up the primary to tomorrow, which is February 27th. It's not November 27th, as Trump referred to it as. God forbid. I didn't should have done that. But it's February 27th tomorrow. So the Democrats will vote and assign their delegates.
Exciting.
And the Republicans will vote, and they'll assign, I forget the number, something like 16 out of the 55 delegates they have. But because the rules say that the delegates have to be assigned after March 1st, they'll have a convention on March 2nd, Saturday.
Okay.
Just like last week South Carolina did. And the bulk of the delegates will be assigned at that time. So if later on when the convention comes, if the delegates who are assigned tomorrow pre-March 1st are challenged, they still have enough delegates so that Michigan won't be, left out. Or something.
I kind of get what they're
But wait,
going
it gets
for.
even better.
Oh, well, all right.
Okay? So they're going to have a convention on March 2nd after March 1st so that the rules are followed, right?
Maybe, yes.
How many conventions does the rule call for?
Oh, I don't know.
It doesn't.
It could be
Therefore,
19 of them.
They'll have two.
Oh, nice.
They'll have the Christine Caramo
my
MAGA convention
God, those
in
guys are
Detroit,
great. I
and
love
they'll
it.
have the Pete Hoekstra conventional conservative GOP convention somewhere else.
Huh.
And which of the two
exciting.
slates will be seated when the Republican National Convention comes around? Well, second of all,
The answer is Mike
the
Pence will
RNC,
tell you.
exactly right. That's first of all. The second of all thing is that the RNC has already said that Pete Hoekstra is the real GOP Republican chair, so his convention is the one that counts. But it's all going to come down to Mike Pence, as you
I
said.
guess so. I mean, well, who at the RNC said it? Because the RNC doesn't know who's heading
They have
the
a committee.
RNC.
Some random committee said
That's
so.
the C, I guess. Yeah, okay. But are those people still on the committee, or have they been thrown out by Donald Trump and replaced by
They
his
haven't. In fact,
in-laws?
I'll tell you how much they haven't. Although Ronna McDaniel is stepping down, she hasn't done so yet. Although Michael Whatley, who is the Republicans' North Carolina chair, is going to take the helm with Lara Trump there as
the
I don't
Jade
know,
helm.
as the minder
she's
that you saw in
co-chair.
Red October. I don't know,
Right.
For whatever
Political
reason,
officer.
yeah, it turns out that they don't really know what they're doing.
I guess not. And they don't, in Michigan, they don't even know who's doing it. We don't know what we're doing. We don't even know if we're the ones doing it. We might not be. There might be somebody else doing it.
So McDaniel's stepping down, but what difference does that make? That committee has some really interesting people on it.
Yes.
One of them is a name you may remember from the past.
George Washington.
Haley Barbour.
Haley Barbour. Yes, I do remember his name.
Right. Governor of a southern state.
Mississippi.
Yeah. And he's actually proposed a couple of resolutions which are sort of anti-Trump.
Oh, well, no one.
One of them says we're not going to hook up with the campaign until after the delegate total has been surpassed. So Trump can't raid the RNC immediately. He's got to win first.
Okay. I mean, that's wise in terms of holding onto your money for as long as you can. Because he's going to steal it.
He has a separate but equal resolution that he's proposing that says that, and the RNC will not pay Trump's legal bills.
Well,
so even after you win, you can't do it.
It's a nice idea. Good luck with it.
We'll see good luck with it. But
and
the point is, there's still some resistance to the whole idea of we'll just take over the RNC and use it as a piggy bank.
Yeah, the people who have been using.
Committee? Who's the steering committee? They're the people that decide whether or not Christine Karama's the real GOP chief in Michigan or whether Pete Hoekstra is. So they've got a whole lot of stuff to sort out, and that's only going to come to the fore on Saturday when they have dueling conventions. But first is tomorrow. That's on the Republican side.
Ah, that's exciting enough. Do we need another
side? On the Democratic side, we have a campaign to write in uncommitted.
Wow. To write that down, I can't even bring myself to do it. So uncommitted, I couldn't decide. Okay, write in uncommitted.
Yep. And so that's a protest vote. Does that mean that the uncommitted people will not vote for Biden in November? A few people say that's what it means, but most people say, I don't know. It's we just want to send them a message.
Said I'm not committed. Why are you asking me to commit?
And it'll be interesting to see how many they get tomorrow. I sent you a copy. I took on the web a picture of the actual ballot.
Looking.
It's green and white, so it'll stand out. It's a ballot from Oakland County.
It's electronic.
And what you'll see is for the Democratic Party.
Yes.
The people running are Joseph R. Biden.
I know that guy.
Dean Phillips, who we'll get to. Marianne Williamson, who's already suspended her campaign.
Okay.
And uncommitted.
Hello, uncommitted.
On the Republican side, we have Ryan Binky.
Binkley. Yeah.
Binkley.
All right.
Are you sure it's not Binky? I want the Binky in.
Yeah, right. It's Christy Brinkley, everyone.
Right.
Because Chris
Christie, Ron DeSantis,
confused, that's
Nikki Haley, Asa Hutchinson, Vivek Ramaswamy, Donald Trump, and uncommitted. As you'll notice, a lot of those folks have already dropped out.
Yes.
On both sides.
Right.
So, it'll be an interesting race. It's always the case where if you have people who have already run, but then you vote for them, what do you do with those votes, and so on and so forth. So, kind of a messy situation there, more so on the Republican side than the Democratic side. But Trump's expected to dominate. And, again, it's only part of the number of electors for the Republicans. On the Democratic side, the question's going to be how many uncommitted votes are there? And we'll know tomorrow night.
Okay. So write-in for
in effect a write-in, but it's a stamped
and it's
write-in.
On there. I mean,
it's like it'll be on there as write-in. Just
see.
Click write-in. You don't even have to say who. Just click write-in.
All right, because you could write in anything. Committed, but I'm not telling you who.
It's uncommitted. You just click the uncommitted part.
Yeah. All right. I don't know what to say about. I guess we'll have to wait and see. Is that unusual?
So that well, people are really upset about Biden. How upset? Well, I have numbers now.
Yeah, I guess not very.
I have numbers in the heart of the protest because Dearborn, Michigan.
Oh, yeah.
So it'll be really interesting to see what happens tomorrow. I don't know. I have no objection to this at all. Neither does Beto O'Rourke for whatever reason. He's decided to weigh into it. Remember Beto O'Rourke? I don't think anybody else does.
Yeah, sure. But, well.
You know, if you want to send a protest vote, send a protest vote. It's your right. You're an American.
Yeah, send it by mail.
Until Donald Trump decides otherwise, we have the right to do this.
Yeah.
Will Biden get the message? He's already gotten the message, but if you want to send it again, cool. That's fine.
Sure,
it's the old FDR apocryphal story. I agree with you. Make me do it.
Guess so. So, it'll be of interest because, I don't know, I won't even really be, but they'll write a story on it and we'll be able to read it if we wish.
Right. Does it hurt Biden? I don't know that it hurts Biden. I think Biden is working really hard on a ceasefire regardless of this. It's not like, because of this vote, Biden all of a sudden decided he doesn't like Netanyahu. He's never liked Netanyahu.
Right.
So the question is, what does he do about it? Well, it's the Middle East. It's not easy.
Yes.
Well, will it become easy after this vote? No, it won't be any easier after this vote.
It won't be solved by this vote, but he might just try to do it anyway. And not because if I do this, then everyone who's mad in Michigan will come back. But does it have nothing to do with people being mad in Michigan? That's not true either. Yeah, I hear you. I'm going to try something.
Well, that's what I would do. Work. I would do whatever I'm going to do and then say, I hear you after tomorrow.
Yeah, I guess.
That's what politicians do. So, fine.
Okay.
We'll see the numbers and then we'll try to figure it out on Wednesday.
All right. And, look, protest all you want. Not like it. I'm not like saying you're going to be ineffective at it either. You might do a great job, but look, I need you to stay interested and active in politics, period. And I think in the end, you'll come down to the right choice.
You speak and have your choice and that we hear it.
If we tell you not to speak now, then you won't be there for November.
You don't always win.
Right. That happens. You might win today and lose the next time. You might lose today and win the next time.
Yeah,
it's okay.
Plant the seed. It's all important. So I'm all for it in that regard. On the other hand, let's wait and see what happens, and we'll have more to say about it.
I guess.
Then there's the primary that actually did happen, and that's in South Carolina. And boy, are takes all over the place there.
Mm-hmm. Yes, really. They are. They've been taken.
There's more hot takes than a pan full of tater tots there.
Well, it warms up earlier there.
Yeah. South Carolina exit polls. Let's look at that. We know what happened. Donald Trump won the South Carolina GOP primary.
Yes.
He got something like 59%, and Nikki Haley got something like 39%.
So it's a lot.
So it was a 20-point win.
Mm-hmm.
How do you interpret this? Well, if you were expecting 30, it looks disappointing.
Okay.
If you were seen as an incumbent, and Trump is a quasi-incumbent for the Republican Party,
yes,
then 40% against you, well, let's just say it's a whole lot higher than I expect Biden's going to get tomorrow in Michigan.
All right, yes.
So does that mean that he's dominant? Well, in the sense that he won. Did he get all of the delegates? Actually, no, he didn't.
Nearly, but yeah, they did have a
Haley won 3 because she won a congressional district. And the delegates are just assigned 3 per district plus, for the state as a whole. And so she got 3. He got more. He's already got like 9% of the delegates he needs. He's got a big lead over her. She hardly has any. Okay. Maybe she has 10 total. I'm not sure, but not a lot. The primary's over. That's not really the point. The point is, can you look at this and say anything whatsoever about what this means for November? And the answer is a resounding no, but people do anyway.
Okay. Well, no, but yes.
No, but here's some of the stuff that we do. We don't know that, but here's what we do know, as they like to say in government.
Here's something we do know. No, you don't know that either. Actually. I know, but I have already begun.
So let's look at the exit polling.
All right.
Somewhat inaccurate, but it tells you a whole lot about what's going on here.
100% of them have exited.
Here's the first most important one for me. Share of the vote. Party affiliation.
Uh-huh.
In the Republican primary, which was open to everybody so long as you hadn't already voted in the Democratic primary, you can't vote twice, 68% of those who voted were Republican.
All right.
And by the way, of those Republicans, Trump won 70%.
Okay.
30% were for Haley.
Yeah. All right.
To me, that's not very impressive, but, whatever.
Of Republicans. Because it's also almost about the same breakdown as between Republicans and independents in this.
Independents were 28% of the electorate.
Yes.
And I think they voted for Haley.
Yeah, all right.
But my point is, Democrats were 5% of the electorate. You can't even say how they voted, probably 100% for Haley, because there were too few of them. My point being, you can't say, well, you can't say anything about Republican voters because Democrats skewed the South Carolina primary. No, they didn't. There actually weren't that many of them.
Yeah, all right.
That's the point. These are Republicans and independents.
Yes, they always worry about that, especially when there's virtually no contest on the Democratic side, so it's no big deal if you miss the primary. That they worry that people will cross over and screw things up in both directions. And, most people just don't do that.
Right. Independents voted Haley 53-46. Moderates, self-described, voted Haley 70-29. Decided this month,
that was Nancy Mace,
66-30. First-time primary voters, Haley 57-42. So Haley won all of those categories. There simply weren't enough of them.
Should have had more categories then.
For her to win.
Oh, I see. Not enough people.
Right, because Republicans dominated this. Yeah. So this was, a Republican result, and the Republican result was Trump only got 59%.
All right, well, they're not that thrilled with him, and maybe it's because he's a terrible candidate, but... All right, he marches on, and three delegates go to Haley. Interesting.
Yeah, more after the break.
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, a.k.a. Darwin_Darko, a.k.a. the most reasonable man in America, a.k.a. KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen versus Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
Yeah, there we go. Okay. All right, everybody. It came at the exact wrong time, but welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I've just been trying to engineer up the ability to listen to a video that Greg has sent, but I'll let you set this up. So that's why you heard weirdness happening on our way back in.
Yeah, hopefully you'll be able to play it.
I think so.
But basically, CNN interviewed a die-hard Trump voter.
Well,
and the first part of the interview is, why did you vote for Donald Trump? Well, first, my faith, and I'm conservative, and I really love what he's done, and I'm a businessman, and I'm a patriot, and for all those reasons, Trump has been good for me, my family, and my business, so I'm absolutely 100% for him.
All right. So he's
and the interviewer says, okay, well, what about all those trial situations, the 91 indictments? Does that give you any pause? That's where the video is at.
Okay. All right. I think we can roll it, and I think it'll work. Let's see.
Let's try it.
Gotta hit the right. And there's buttons all over the place on this one. Here we go. Just getting started. Here we go. My personal family. Yeah.
So I'm not hearing anything.
You're not hearing anything. Okay. Well, I am, and it's terrific. So let me see if why would it not be playing on this. Well, let's see if we can play it on the other
Yeah, while you
computer.
work on it, let me
all right.
tell you what's on the video in case it doesn't work.
Okay.
So what happens is the interviewer says, so does that give you pause? And the guy thinks about it and says, well, I have to tell you, I've run afoul of the law myself.
Oh, all right.
The law is really confusing and it can be really ambiguous. And I brought a gun to the airport, and so I got in trouble. So, I think, no, not really.
Gun to the airport.
Wouldn't bother me.
Maybe I know that guy.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that is interesting. I'm curious.
But wait, it gets more interesting.
All right.
And you can only appreciate the nuance from actually watching the video because you get to watch his face and you get to listen to him. And the interviewer goes on to say, okay, so that's the indictments. What about if he's actually convicted? And the guy pauses and said, well, wait a minute. I really have to think about this.
Ooh.
This is, my honest answer is, that would really affect my decision. I really have to think about this. And that's where the interview ends.
Interesting. I think I'm afraid that I know how it'll come out.
And what we've been saying is that the trials matter, the convictions matter. If Trump actually is broke and has to sell off his building, people will notice this. If Trump is actually convicted, even diehard Trump voters will notice this. And if that's the effect it has on diehard Trump voters, what effect does it have on normies?
Yeah.
Or the loosely,
loosely normal. Maybe not so normal. I don't know. Let's see if I can. Maybe if I play this on my desktop, the laptop, and have the microphone on, it will work. I can't figure out why it wouldn't work on it, but it's a different
all
file
we want
format.
Is a sound. So let's see.
It takes a while to get started.
Experience as president.
You able to hear that?
Okay. Was incredible for my personal family, for my religious beliefs.
I like that, my personal
and
family.
As an entrepreneur, my business beliefs in America.
Do you have any concerns about his legal challenges? Did any of the 91 charges that he's facing give you any pause to support him?
As somebody who has accidentally broken the law myself, carrying a firearm into an airport, I believe that the legal system can be confusing, not always transparent. And until he is charged, found guilty for something and punished appropriately so for it, I am not concerned about where he stands currently with legal situations.
So if he is convicted, you would be potentially open to voting for someone else?
I don't know if I would go and, hold on, let me think for a second.
He asks for time.
It would have a serious impact on my decisions. I would say that. I would honestly say that is probably where my stance is currently. It would have a serious impact on my decisions.
Okay, all right, just as you told us. Interesting.
But, listen to him. You're making me think. Wait a minute.
Yeah. What are you doing? But he does it, and he's very, well, like I said, well spoken compared to, we're normally used to hearing Trump rally parking lot interviews that make no sense. This is good. Funny that, so he's brought a gun accidentally, as he says, to the airport. So I may know him from gun fail. I may actually have reported this guy's story at some point, depending on how old the story is. I do note that it says that this is taking place in Rock Hill, South Carolina, which is it's the southeastern regional gun fail capital. From way long time ago, like when we were first collecting all these stories, Rock Hill came up all the time with people having gun accidents. It is a bit of a hot spot. My guess is his story may be in the archives somewhere. I don't know if we know his name.
I guess my point is, though, this is really
there was another point.
This is not a plant. This is a guy who is 100% committed to voting for Trump, and yet even he, if you bring up the fact that he was convicted in a court of law, it's like, how could you seat these people on a jury? You can, because when jury folks actually sit down and deliberate, for the most part, they do the right thing.
Yeah. It could mean anything.
You can see
he could be a total liar.
This guy deal with this question, you have to feel better about juries trying to deal with Trump.
Yeah, you hope so. That was interesting, and I like that. Well, why is the law confusing about guns and airports? That's actually that is a super
because
solid,
I wanted
completely.
To do something. They wouldn't let me. That's why it's confusing.
That is 100%.
I don't understand.
Transparent. don't bring your guns to the airport. Don't bring your guns on the airplane. And I'm sure he's thinking, well, I didn't. They caught me well before the airplane. Why am I in trouble?
Yeah, I had it in my bag. It's not like, I had it in my pocket.
Yeah. But you're here and you have a business and you're still voting. So how bad is the legal system after all? You've done something that could get you in, terrorism rap, but you still got your business, family, and ballot.
Right. So I think that there's a small slice of Republican voters who are still persuadable. You know who else thinks that? Mike Madrid. He was looking at the results. He's a Republican operative who's left the party. He's now a never-Trumper, and said people are focusing on the wrong things. You have to focus on disaffected Republicans. That's the key to winning in November. All right. And the other person who believes that is Sarah Longwell, who does the focus groups for the Bulwark. She's also the publisher of the Bulwark, by the way, but also a committed never-Trumper. Her fear is third parties because they could steal votes from Biden, but her expectation is that Biden will win, and she thinks it's because of disaffected Republican voters who, when you talk to them, are not completely and totally 100% committed to Donald Trump. And when you hear the ones who are still have pause when you bring up the legal stuff, you understand how powerful that might be. Mike Madrid thinks that Biden should just pound, the electorate with that from now until November. And here's another tidbit to support that from CNN exit polls from South Carolina.
All right.
If Trump wins the nomination among Haley supporters only, the 40%.
Asking them, right,
Okay. If Trump wins the nomination, 21% of them will be satisfied, 78% will be dissatisfied. Mm-hmm. If Trump is convicted, 15%, 1/5, say he's still fit for the presidency, and 82% say he's not.
Well, he's not.
There are votes in there to be gotten, is what I'm trying to say.
Okay. Yeah, he'll have been nominated anyway, and there will be people who you can... Who ordinarily, thinking about the Trump strategy of base turnout, where their whole big plan was we can win by turning out, what would they say, inconsistent voters, or even people who have never, first-time voters who are, not because they're 18, but because they've never voted, and they could sneak them in and overtake even the increased Democratic turnout. But that also depended on regular, dependable voting Republicans coming out and doing the Republican thing. So even if he's able to bring out these infrequent voters, if they're not supplemental to the entire Republican base coming out, it doesn't work. So... All right, yeah. I mean, the number of people
South Carolina is a
home,
very conservative state, and the Republican base there looks more like Iowa than it does New Hampshire. So they're basically white evangelicals.
Okay. All
right. And yet, in South Carolina, conservative South Carolina, first-time primary voters voted Haley 57-42 over Trump. Now, that doesn't mean that they'd vote for Biden. That's the whole
Not
thing
necessarily.
About don't get ahead of your skis and don't necessarily assume that that's what this is telling you.
All you have to do is not.
But what I'm saying is that these are not automatic Trump voters, and the whole strategy that Biden and Trump are taking is quite different than 2016 and 2020.
Okay. Yes.
In other words, what Biden is doing is similar to 2020, and Trump isn't. Biden is not saying, I want everybody to love me, and I'm putting together a strongly pro-Biden, I'm the best president ever coalition. He's putting together an anti-Trump coalition.
Okay.
So there'll be a lot of people that don't like him that still vote for him. Will that work? Well, it worked in 2020. There's no reason to think it won't work.
Yeah, I assume you want to go with the thing that worked last time.
Right. Trump, on the other hand, is actually hoping to suppress Biden vote. So he's trying to pick every single possible wedge issue, pick off some people on the border, pick off some people by saying, well, I get that Roe and Dobbs and even this IVF stuff, which I don't really understand. Isn't that Independent Veterans for Freedom, IVF? What does IVF stand for? I don't understand it any more than Tommy Tuberville does. But nonetheless, let me just say that whatever possible middle position I can take that sounds semi-reasonable, I will take. And so after Alabama did this based on the judges and justices I appointed over the years, I nonetheless take no responsibility for that decision whatsoever. And I hope that Alabama changes their tune and supports IVF by passing legislation which that same Supreme Court in Alabama would declare unconstitutional because it's now written into the Alabama Constitution. So if you understood any of that, let me know, because I didn't understand it. I'm just reading from a card here, and I hope you vote for me despite everything you think about reproductive rights. So he's trying to pick off some people there. He tries to pick off some people some other places. He's trying to decrease the Biden coalition as much as possible. That's what campaigns do. Totally understandable. But it's not necessarily let's get as many people as possible to vote, which really was his strategy in 2020.
Bringing in new people.
Yeah, and he's not relying on that now.
Well, now they're not new.
I get they're already there. So, it's really quite interesting. Get out the vote is always a part of it. But, what Biden is doing is just something totally different. And it's just really interesting to watch. And in that regard, there's a couple of interesting takes on this. This one is from Dan Pfeiffer, ex-Obama person.
All right.
In the message box, he writes, yet another underwhelming Trump primary win. Trump's on the glide path to nomination, but he isn't improving his performance with swing voters. Oh. It was so decisive, the networks called it within minutes. Well, that's because everywhere in the state was going to vote for him. They already expected that. Yeah. He's on track to win 47 of the state's 50 delegates. That's what happened. Haley won 3.
Yeah. Do we know what district she won in?
District 1.
Mace.
Where Charleston is.
Nancy Mace, right?
Yeah, her district.
There you go. Because of the moderates.
Yeah, because of the moderates. However, and that's why Nancy Mace is such a whack job.
Yes.
She doesn't necessarily reflect her constituents. She reflects her vision of path to power, like Elise Stefanik does.
Oh, yeah, that's a good comparison.
However, the real story is that Trump underperformed expectations, Pfeiffer writes, and failed to expand his coalition. Once again, despite another dominant primary victory, the results highlighted Trump's vulnerabilities and offered a roadmap for defeating him in November. Based on the exit polls, Trump's campaign team should be popping Xanax with the champagne. No, he's not trying to kill Trump. I mean, if you pop Xanax and took champagne, you'd probably die, but that's not what we're talking about here. No. You cannot win the White House with the coalition that Trump is getting in these primaries. He must expand the coalition, persuade people who aren't already on board, get beyond the big lie-believing MAGA base. Through 3 primary contests, Trump has gained no ground. He's not consolidating the party. He's got an ongoing swing voter problem. Even GOP primary voters don't want an abortion ban. New York Times recently reported Trump was going to support a 16-week national abortion ban. The position should be incredibly popular in South Carolina, except it isn't. Oh. According to the exit polls, only a bare majority of South Carolina GOP primary voters support a national abortion ban. That's in a GOP primary. The state as a whole,
Okay.
This is a shocking finding in a Republican primary where 60% of the voters are evangelical Christians. White evangelical Christians, I would add. To put that in perspective, in the 2020 general election, less than 30% of voters were evangelical Christians.
Yeah.
And Trump lost to 44% of voters who oppose a ban by 15 points. Abortion bans are unpopular. Another point, the big lie is a big problem for Trump. A strong majority of South Carolina Republican primary participants do not believe Joe Biden won the 2020 election. Only 36% in this primary believe the election was legitimate. And that may be cause for despair, but here's a bit of good news. Trump lost the voters who don't buy the big lie by 62 points. Again, we're not talking about winning a majority of Republicans. We never are. We're talking about carving out a slice of them, just like Trump is trying to carve out a slice of Biden voters. And that's why this stuff is more important. The more Trump pushes the big lie, the better it is for Joe Biden and Democrats up and down the ballot. Trump will be the Republican nominee. Nothing Haley can do will stop him. However, In primary after primary, the results show he's among the weakest nominees in modern political history. So there's all sorts of focus on Biden's weaknesses, but people don't focus enough on just how weak a candidate Trump is.
All right.
He's scary. He's terrible. He's also pretty weak.
Yeah, and it's hard to reconcile the two thoughts when he occupies so much of your time because you worry about him destroying the entire country and maybe the international community as well. You know,
he's a
doesn't
jerk.
seem
I think
weak.
Part of the despair is that
Like,
people
how could you
on
do
our
that
side,
and be weak?
on my side,
Yeah.
still don't understand how normal conservative Republicans aid and abet him.
Right.
He didn't get where he was by himself. He got there through people like Bill Barr, people far more competent than he is,
Yeah.
who not only allowed him to get to what he did, they did his bidding to try to, make it so. Mm-hmm. And that's the part people can't really wrap their heads around. I certainly can't, and I think a lot of people on the Democratic side can't. It's not him. It's those folks. What is wrong with them?
Yes, they're terrible, terrible people, and then there's enough stories. I don't even know how. I don't know. Maybe you would have never gotten through to this voter that they interviewed, but so many stories of people coming to wake up to realize, he's been personally good for me, my family, my business, et cetera, et cetera. But that, his specialty is eventually throwing all of you overboard and stealing all your money, right? I'd have to think about that. I'd have to wonder, what would I do if Trump personally went after me and my family and stole all my money? I don't know.
Well, I happen to know people who are in that situation, who were
Oh.
otherwise conservatives, who lived in New York, who were small business people, who did work for the Trump organization and got stiffed.
What do you know? Well, you
they
know
won't
that.
vote for him again.
Well, see? Okay. You should get him together with this guy down in Rock Hill and talk him into this. Well, good. I mean, ordinarily you would say this is not enough to change the outcome of the election. But actually, that's a large community of people who have done work for the Trump organization and been stiffed by them, because it's everybody that's done work with the Trump organization.
Right.
Yeah, interesting.
Right. And for those of you who are playing along at home, David has a secret signal. He calls the house.
Yes.
The phone rings. I put the microphone on mute, and he gets to talk.
Right. That's why I keep his phone number handy. Why do you have Greg's phone number when you're speaking to him on Skype right now? Well, let me explain.
Actually.
Yeah. Okay. So, all right, would be a good plan if I had made it.
So here's another one. This one is from a fellow named Walter Shapiro. I love Walter Shapiro. He's been around forever.
Okay.
He got his start with, I think, Congressional Quarterly, like in the 60s.
Yes.
60s.
Close.
He's covered 9 presidential elections.
Wow. Okay.
All right. He's also had a history, like Joe Rogan, as a comedian, stand-up comedian and satirist. He's really very good. And, he's currently writing for The New Republic, TNR.
All right.
Along with Greg Sargent and some other interesting people. And he's got a piece here, how Nickki Haley can beat Trump. But it's not what you think. It's
You're
not
right.
like how
Can't
she
be.
can beat him in the Republican primary.
Oh,
That's not
with
what he's
a
talking
stick?
about. She won't win the Republican nomination, but by staying in the race, she's lowering Donald Trump's chances of returning to the White House.
All right.
She will beat Joe. She will beat Donald Trump for Joe Biden, in other words. And no, she doesn't have to endorse Biden. She doesn't have to, become a never Trumper. She just has to keep doing what she's doing. How long will she do that? That's unclear. Some of the fallout after the South Carolina primaries at the Koch network, Americans for Prosperity, pulled their support for Haley. But that's not the only money she has. Americans for Prosperity have had not much success trying to influence where the elections go. And she's got small donor money now. She raised $1 million after losing the primary. And she says she's not going anywhere, at least until Super Tuesday, which is like another 10 days from now.
Okay.
So she'll be in there
time.
until then. And she announced, I'm not going anywhere.
And we believe her.
Waging a race he writes against Donald Trump that even Don Quixote might consider not worth the gamble Nikki Haley gives the impression that at long last she's gone full never Trump, but in truth, she's nowhere near morphing into Chris Christie with a Southern accent. And you go, girl. That's not her. She
doesn't even have a Southern accent, really.
Christie, whose campaign died before the New Hampshire primary, excoriated Trump in terms that an MSNBC viewer could easily cheer. In an early December debate, Christie called Trump a dictator, a bully, an angry, bitter man. All true.
Yeah.
But, and Christie added that Trump's intolerance of everyone has directly contributed to rising bigotry in America. So Christie nailed Trump for who he is. It had no effect on Republican voters. Haley's approach in the final days before Saturday's South Carolina primary is far more cautious and surgical. She's trying to appeal to that Rock Hill, South Carolina guy, in other words.
Yes, so.
In a Tuesday speech giving her full-throated justification for staying in the race, Haley said, like most Americans, I have a handful of serious concerns about the former president. I have countless serious concerns about the current president. That line alone virtually guarantees Haley will not magically appear as a surprise guest at the August Democratic Convention.
Right, sure.
So she's not going to pull a Joe Lieberman there. Although the plucky Haley portrays herself as a loyal Republican, her limited but scorching attacks on Trump are worth examining in detail. She's appealing to a dwindling band of Reagan Republicans, suburban moderates, and up-for-grabs independents. There are probably not enough of those voters to hand Haley a primary victory, as we just saw.
Right.
But these are constituencies that the Joe Biden campaign will also target in November. Haley is, in effect, offering a crash course in how to woo those voters who do not automatically assume Trump is a racist and fascist out to trample the Constitution. So some of Haley's attacks are geared solely to the GOP primaries. Mm-hmm. One theme that Biden won't be emulating is Haley's anguished comments that Trump is bankrupting the RNC.
Though it might be wise to bring it up, but it won't be anguished.
Right. The Haley campaign released early this month a video called The Grumpy Old Men Say What? And that's probably not something that they would emulate either. Right. So jabs like this are a reminder that if the Republican Party were not afflicted with a Trumpian death wish, it would see in Haley a potential nominee primed to challenge the 81-year-old Biden over his biggest vulnerability, his age. Now, I just have to add as a parenthetical that those who say, well, obviously Haley would trounce Biden don't understand politics.
Okay.
At all. Because if Haley were the nominee, yes, Trump would tell MAGA people to stay home, form a third party, or write in Putin, and some of them would write in Hitler.
Yeah, maybe.
There's no way that faction would vote for Haley in a general election. Not happening. And if you don't take that into account, or at least try to figure what percentage of Republican voters would do that, you're not a serious analyst.
Okay.
Well, the polls say, I can't say it on the air what you should do with those polls.
Okay. Could you write it in on a ballot?
Well, no. But let's just say I'm uncommitted on that.
All right. You should put that in an uncommitted place.
Yes.
You might be committing something
I think
if you
we
do
should
that.
The previous question on that. Open the floor for
right.
amendments. Questing for an issue that might have traction in South Carolina with this large community of veterans, Haley resurrected Trump's dismissive comments about McCain, her husband. That's something that Biden could work with. Mm-hmm. Right? Retired General Don Bolduc, remember him? Right-wing Haley supporter who lost the 2022 Senate race in New Hampshire, who's now working somewhere as a sheriff.
Oh, okay.
Said at a press conference sponsored by the campaign, Donald Trump sought deferments for bone spurs. I had bone spurs and went through Ranger School.
So you can do it?
You can do it.
I had no idea.
Right? So just as reporters were hyperventilating over the recent discovery that Biden was not a young man, Trump went out of his way to remind the world he remains Vladimir Putin's puppet with the NATO stuff.
Cool.
I'm summarizing, but that's what he said in the NATO stuff.
Yeah, he probably did say
That's
that.
my summary.
Okay. That might be, I could easily have been a direct quote.
Right. Given the feckless Republican attitude toward Ukraine and Putin, it's important to remember that the GOP appeasers are on the wrong side of public opinion. In the same speech justifying her determination to press on despite everything, Haley also spoke to the GOP's timorous refusal to confront Trump. As she put it, many of the same politicians who now publicly embrace Trump privately dread him. They know what a disaster he's been and will continue to be for our party. They're just too afraid to say it out loud. Interestingly enough, I think there's another piece by Sarah Longwell, not in the Bulwark, but in the Atlantic, which I didn't pull today, which is all about how Trump was inevitable in the Republican primary because his opponents refused to deal with the 91 indictments and his other weaknesses.
Well,
they pulled all their punches, so of course he won. There was no way that they were going to win, and there's no way he's going to lose if you won't attack him on his weaknesses, and they were afraid to do that. So I think that Shapiro and Sarah Longwell are absolutely right when they say that.
Okay. I mean, it was that's the assumption everybody has always made. You can't win when you're under indictment like that because everyone will say, you can't vote for that guy. He's under indictment. But if no one was willing to say it, that will change.
They were defending him. And Ron DeSantis was,
right.
He
shouldn't be
example
indicted.
number one.
I'll pardon him. Yeah. Well, yeah.
Haley
I
also
don't
said
see how you win that way.
There's no way that you can do that in a general election. Of course, Biden won't. But the Republicans did, and that's how come Trump's the nominee.
Right. So, okay. I mean, it's good news that Biden will actually not do that. He will not be campaigning about how he'll pardon Trump and how it's all wrong that he was indicted. Right. Good.
So my segment's over, but I just have to read the title and the subheading on this piece from Glamour magazine.
Really? Okay.
Hotbed of political discussion.
Sometimes.
Right?
Okay.
Completely different topic, but just to emphasize how important this is.
Yeah.
These embryos are 5 years' worth of money, sadness, and hope. I just want to be a mom. The Alabama Supreme Court ruled last week frozen embryos are legally considered children, which effectively banned IVF treatment in the state. Here's how the decision impacts one couple. That's everywhere. It's in Glamour magazine. It's in sporting publications. It's everywhere. You can't escape this. This is such a disaster for the Republicans. It's on a scale of Dobbs. And that's not being figured into anybody's calculation, mostly on the Republican side, but that includes the pundits in regard to what does this mean for the fall. You haven't wrapped your head around it yet. You still don't understand Dobbs.
Yeah.
Because you don't even bring it up 9/10 of the time. And it's so important. This is so important. It's such a big deal. I think all of what we talked about today are why, Trump ought to be taking some Xanax with his champagne.
Yeah. Well, it is. It doesn't impact a lot of people who feel themselves to be conservative voters, who are against abortion, and yet this thing is totally different. They do feel very differently about it. And you ought to. All right, Greg, we'll check in with you again on Wednesday.
Yeah, we'll talk about one of the Michigan primaries anyway.
One, both. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's see, where do we stand? What do we want to bring up here next? Mention of, was it Don Bolduc? Was it Bolduc? Bolduc? I don't know how he pronounces that, but it rang a bell for me because he was just in the news just the other day, and maybe I can give you some idea of what he's been up to and what he's been saying, besides working as a sheriff, which, okay, that's an interesting twist all by itself. And then, of course, mention on the way out the door for Greg about the IVF situation and the number of people who consider themselves to be, in many cases, conservatives, and in agreement, generally speaking, with the Republican Party on issues of abortion, even up to and possibly including bans, national bans on abortion, but who regard IVF as something completely different. And I'm sure they were not heeding any of the warnings that people were saying, logically, the Republicans don't stop on this, and they're going to plow straight through. Dobbs is going to give them a clear shot at everything, including IVF, and you don't understand. And they didn't understand, and they're surprised and shocked by this, but that too going to undermine Trump's ability to run in November if there are even a small number of people, minuscule by comparison with the number of people who will have been personally hurt by this, but will say, yeah, but low taxes, or yeah, but we're hurting immigrants, and he's beating up the right people, and I guess I'll just swallow my pride and go for it. Just this, another place where a small number of people will say, I can't abide by this. Anyway, also very interesting. And by the way, a very pithy take offered on the IVF thing. And it won't change any minds here, because I think I know where just about everybody is on IVF here on the show, but you can carry this away with you. Someone carrying this from Twitter onto Blue Sky. The tweet comes from Julia Claire, about whom I know nothing, but you should maybe get to know something, because this is of interest. Or you can find her on Twitter, if you dare go there again, as OH, like Julia tweets. Oh, well, she shouldn't. She should come over to Blue Sky and work there instead, but whatever. Various reasons people retain their active Twitter accounts. But in this case, we're glad she did, because she differentiated. For people who are not sure, I don't know, IVF, it's a weird ethical situation. You're freezing these embryos. These are potential lives. But of course, don't forget that people like Nickki Haley, super moderate, being reasonable, right? She and the rest of the Republican Party generally came around to say, well, these are babies. They're babies. And you can't destroy them, or you can't leave them stranded forever in frozen states or what have you, and you could adopt the embryos, as Republicans have advocated for in the past, is a term that fell out of use because the word got what's the word? Now what's the word I'm looking for? The word got hijacked for other purposes, but they used to push for what they called, or advocate for, snowflake babies. That is to say, these would be embryos created for the IVF process, and then when the IVF process was successful for a couple and they had whatever number of children they were looking to have through the IVF process, but there were embryos left over, essentially, then what do you do with them? And that, it's an interesting philosophy class question. But in the real world, you got to make some sort of decision. Like, you keep these things frozen forever, or you give them you let people adopt them. But that was the idea. Snowflake adoptions. You're going to adopt a IVF leftover embryo and use it yourself. Which, I don't know how I feel about that, even ethically. But okay, at any rate, the point was that led people like the super moderate Republican, reasonable person, anti-Trump, yada, yada, Nickki Haley, and other Republican idiots to say, well, look, it's interesting. They're trying to find out, where is the line? And they're fumbling around for it in the dark, trying to figure out where are Republican voters. So their first instinct is to say, those are babies. Life begins at conception, right? That's what they've been saying all along. That's the line you're supposed to repeat. That's why you can have an abortion ban at, 3 weeks, 2 weeks, whatever they're making up. Life begins at conception. That's conception. And so therefore, those are babies. Well, Julia here clears it up. So putting a real baby, those are babies, right? No, they're not babies. And here's why. Putting a baby in a freezer would kill it. But freezing embryos does the opposite. Freezing embryos keeps them alive. That's why an embryo isn't a baby. And she helpfully adds at the end, hope that helps if you're very stupid. And but that actually kind of cuts through and clarifies for people a little bit too, doesn't it? Well, if this is that, then they will behave similarly if you put them in a cryogenic freezer, right? Put a baby in a cryogenic freezer, that's the end of the baby. Doesn't matter how long you wait, doesn't matter how you warm them up later, they're dead. Put an embryo in there, get a different result. Is an embryo a baby? It is. Don't know what it is, but I know what it isn't. It isn't something that dies if you freeze it. Freeze a baby, freeze an adult, whatever it is, that's the end of that life. Freeze an embryo, it can come back. Is it the same thing? I don't know what it is. Is it life? I don't know. Is it the same thing as the other thing that dies? It is not. The result is the opposite. That is strange. You're going to have to get your head around that. But like I said, this is Republicans searching for the edge. How far can they go on issues like this, issues like abortion? They're testing it out. Their base will tell them that is too far, and you'll start to see them withdrawing from that, following along on the parade. And that's a good thing. It's good for all of us if the political consensus comes back towards sensibility. But in the meantime, we're probably going to have an election cycle or two where they can't escape having endorsed this, especially with a state Supreme Court having done something this dumb. That's going to be on people's mind for a considerable period, and it will cost them lots of votes. All right. I told you also that Don Boldich was in the news recently. I'll just share with you what that's about. I saw this story the other day, opted not to put it aside because who cares what Don Boldich has to say about anything really, except that, okay, this was an interesting thing a Republican could say. And it comes via Philip Bump's column in the Washington Post, as almost everything I read from the Washington Post now does. And I've got still more from Philip Bump to read to you later on, whether it's all today or this week. But this was an interesting thing. Lying about 2020 fraud, this is the headline, was just, quote, a political game to one Republican. Now, you're meant to be able to take away from this the fact that it's likely a political game for many Republicans, but only one Republican so far has gone on the record in admitting it, and that's this Don Boldich fellow. Don is now a patrolman on the police force of Pittsfield, New Hampshire. Population 4,100. That's important somehow. But this is not the job he had hoped to be doing in February of 2024. In September of 2022, he won the Republican primary for U.S. Senate in New Hampshire, earning the right to face off against Senator Maggie Hassan, right, and in November. And do I still pronounce her name? Am I got it right or have I got it wrong? I still don't know. I did learn at some point, and then we stopped talking about her because it was no longer 2022, and I don't have to think about how she pronounces her name again until, 2028, I guess, or she does something super important and makes the news again. She's a senator. It could happen at any time. Well, anyway, he lost by a wider margin than polls had suggested. Stupid polls. Hence, his unexpected new career in law enforcement. It is a different tack. What were you going to do? What are your plans for the future? United States Senator or a patrolman in a police force for a town of 4,100 people in New Hampshire. The Concord Monitor checked in on him last week, which is also not often done. The conversation focused mostly on Boldich's unusual employment trajectory, but also explored a bit of his 2022 ambitions, and it was in that part of the conversation that Boldich offered an important insight, including pronunciation of his name, probably, which I guess I'm also still guessing at. So it's not like I favored the Republicans in that contest. I don't know how to pronounce either of their names. When he was running in 2022, Boldich gained national attention for his inconsistent approach to a key issue, whether Donald Trump legitimately won the 2020 election. In August, he told a cheering audience of Republican primary voters that, quote, Trump won the election. In September, after winning that primary, he went on cable news to say that President Biden is the legitimate president of this country and that the election was not stolen. So, interesting. If you guys ask 2, 3, 4, 10 people what they make of this, you probably get different answers. Because one way to read that is, thank God he finally fessed up and started telling the truth, as this headline would suggest is the interpretation is supposed to be, right? Even a Republican candidate for Senate in 2022 who used to say the opposite, he's confessing that they just got instructions from the Republican National Committee or wherever that you should just go around saying this stuff. On the other hand, you notice the timing here. As a primary candidate, when only Republicans were voting, that's right, it was stolen, everybody, because he knows that would work. The minute he no longer was running in the primary and was now campaigning for the general election, he came out and told the actual truth that Joe Biden had won the election. That's another way of looking at it, and they're both correct. Anyway, so there we have it. But he then flipped again, so I really don't know what to tell you about this guy, except I guess now I'm worried that how's law enforcement going in Pittsfield, New Hampshire? Because this guy, who's a patrolman, he can't tell you who's the legitimate president of the United States. If he gives you an answer and you don't like it, wait 5 minutes. Because in October, in the general election, later, he suggested in a debate that there was, in fact, rampant fraud in his state. New Hampshire, where everybody's in the state legislature. Probably not that much fraud going on. There's no rampant anything in New Hampshire because there's just not enough people. Well, okay. Percentage-wise, it could be rampant, I guess, but it didn't happen. So, anyway, we need to make sure that the school buses loaded with people at the polls don't come in and vote, he said. Now, why would you say something like that? Someone in the audience chuckled. You can laugh about it, he added, but people in New Hampshire aren't laughing about it. Well, where did he think he was that person was laughing? That's interesting, too. You can laugh about it, but people in New Hampshire aren't laughing about it. Idiot, this is New Hampshire, and I just laughed. That's pretty dumb, so not a great statement. Anyway, pressed on the claim by the moderator, since it's an old, unfounded assertion, Bowlditch insisted that this is what he had been hearing and therefore needed to be addressed. A very weak answer. But that's not actually true, sir. Well, that's what I heard. Well, then you're an idiot. So, anyway, that was candidate Bowlditch. Speaking to the Monitor this week, Officer Bowlditch offered a slightly different perspective. I do believe there was fraud. That's something that can't be disputed. I mean, it can't be disputed that you believe it, I guess. But at the end of the day, I played a political game, right? So then I decided no more political games. I'm going to say what I honestly believe, and that is the election wasn't stolen. At least that's what I honestly believe this week, I guess. In fact, it cannot be disputed that there was fraud. There have been dozens of people arrested around the country for having violated voting laws. A handful were arrested in New Hampshire, too, but this in no way proves or even suggests that the election was, quote, stolen, as Trump has so often claimed, and as any Republican seeking his party's nomination in 2022 might have been tempted to claim. Don't forget that some significant number of people arrested for voting fraud in 2022 were voting for Republicans. And those arrested for fraud in 2020, many of them were voting for Trump, so there was voter fraud for him too. As Bowlditch... where were we? Right. Trump often claimed, many in the party have been tempted to claim about things like this, the voter fraud. Bowlditch was too. He, quote, played a political game, elevating an assertion he didn't believe. We understand that such things happen with regularity. Candidates make claims that they believe will appeal to voters rather than the ones they actually believe or are ready to defend. The divergence between assertion and belief can be wide or narrow, the presentation nuanced or reckless, but it's politics. The difference here is that the political game that Bowlditch felt he should play was so dangerous. It was demonstrably dangerous by the point which Bowlditch was espousing it, having served as the basis for violence at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, right? But then he figures as a cop, oh, what the heck? Maybe I will espouse it again anyway. But no, I changed my mind a third time. Polling has repeatedly shown that most Republicans think the results of the 2020 election weren't legitimate. In August, CNN and SSRS polling found that 4 in 10 Republicans believed there was solid evidence that the election wasn't legitimate, which is not the case. You can see how this is self-reinforcing, especially if the local cops once said it. The Republican base believes fervently that something was amiss in 2020 because Republican politicians and officials repeat the claim that something was amiss. They repeat that claim because they're worried that the Republican base will punish them if they don't adhere to it. It's less a political game than a doom spiral. Bowlditch had embraced other false right-wing rhetoric on the campaign trail, such as, for instance, in case you were wondering, well, how dumb is he actually? Yes, he signed on to the idea that school children were, quote, identifying as cats and demanding litter boxes. But none was as central to Republican politics as claims about the election being stolen. But in case you were wondering just how far he went, yes, he was a litter box moron. In the end, Bowlditch only barely won the Senate primary, edging out State Senate President Chuck Morse. That must have been embarrassing. Morse was endorsed by a horse, of course, and no one endorses a horse, of course, unless the horse is actually Chris Sununu. It doesn't really fit, but okay, you can make a song out of it. Anyway, he was endorsed by the horse in the person of Chris Sununu and other established Republican figures, but in 2022, that was playing an older, less relevant type of political game. Bowlditch got Trump's endorsement for November, and then, of course, ask Trump what happened. And the answer is, I won just as I did with 100% of the people I endorsed. They all won. That's how powerful I am. No, Bowlditch lost. He's a cop now. Trump pinned his walk back on the election fraud claims, though, as the cause of his loss. See, he changed direction. That's why he lost. Now, he's just another Pittsfield cop, albeit probably the only one to have told the New Yorker in October of 2022 that the rioters who beat police during the Capitol riot simply, quote, believed that their rights were violated. They believed that they lost their voice because, the election was stolen, as Bump concludes things here. It's an interesting thing to be, he's probably not the only Pittsfield police officer who sometimes thinks it's okay for citizens who get mad about having their rights curtailed to beat the police straight back. Well, that really is interesting. And I'll bet that doesn't get entered into the record in any cases in which they've arrested people in Pittsfield for resisting arrest. Officer, isn't it the case that you said sometimes it's okay for citizens who believe their rights have been violated to beat the police after all? It's interesting that you're here now on a resisting arrest charge. You said that was a great idea. What? No. Yes, no. Yes, no. I don't know. I'm not certain what my position is on this. I change my mind all the time. Okay. Whatever. Interesting. But of course you could always say, if that doesn't convince the jury, officer, isn't it the case that you said that you believed that children were identifying as cats and demanding litter boxes in our schools? I mean, yeah. He's not going to make a great witness if anybody really even realizes who he is. Anyway, just thought I'd throw that one in there on the record for you. There's plenty of other things for us to read through. In fact, we could turn the whole second half of the show into the Philip Bump show once again. There were a couple of items that I had last week that I thought it might be wise to, or might be useful to read through. And maybe we ought to, since this week will also include, I guess, the Senate trying to, one, avoid the government shutdown, but we'll have all day tomorrow to talk about that one because it's a Tuesday. It's government shutdown day. We talked to Joan McCarter. Exciting things still happening on that front. But at the same time that they're supposed to be trying to avoid a government shutdown, they're supposed to be handling an impeachment. In this case, the Mayorkas impeachment. But at the same time, Republicans continue to insist on Capitol Hill. I don't know if everybody agrees with it. Certainly not all of Republicans. Ken Buck doesn't, but official Washington Republicans actually still say it doesn't matter that the main witness against Biden, Joe Biden, in his impeachment or our creating of an impeachment atmosphere for him, changes nothing, right? No material difference given the fact that the guy who lied about him and drove this impeachment thing is now indicted for doing so. Anyway, Philip Bump had this piece. He's got some sort of nuance that he wants to offer us about the situation. And I'm not certain that I grasped it last week. And we didn't read it, so now's our chance and maybe we can grasp it. Don't confuse the baseless GOP impeachment push with the debunked one. And I'm not certain whether he means as between the two different impeachments, Mayorkas and Biden, or whether the basis for the Biden impeachment has shifted. And we're not to confuse the two bases. This was a piece from Thursday of last week, and I saw Bump, making his way around social media trying to introduce this nuance back into the discourse, and he was getting a little frustrated. So let's see what he has to say here. When then Speaker Kevin McCarthy announced in September that the House Republican Conference would move forward with an impeachment inquiry targeting President Biden, he identified a few promising threads of investigation. And one was that, quote, a trusted FBI informant has alleged a bribe to the Biden family. Another was that Biden had been inappropriately involved with his son Hunter's engagement with the Ukrainian energy company. And a third, you need to separate these in order to, it does come under one big heading in the newspapers, but I guess this is the nuance. The third was that Biden appeared to be broadly involved in his son's and brother's business activities. And I need to conflate all this stuff in order to make something hold together, because so many of the major elements of each one of these stories has collapsed. All right, so at the time, none of these was substantiated, and in fact, much of McCarthy's framing, even then, was obviously misleading or flatly dishonest, but then the goal was to investigate these things and perhaps reinforce the allegations, and that is not what has happened. Last week, the first thread above, the trusted FBI informant alleging that there was a bribe, blew apart in spectacular fashion. The trusted FBI informant was indicted on a charge of lying to the FBI in 2020, specifically about this alleged bribe to Joe Biden. The indictment presents extensive evidence, both that the informant couldn't have had the conversations he said he did, conversations that were themselves only secondhand documentation of the alleged bribes to begin with, and that the informant was eager to see Biden's campaign falter. Then it got worse. The informant allegedly has connections to foreign intelligence, including in Russia. As an aside, it is not alleged that the bribery allegation was a product of interference from foreign intelligence. Instead, the new allegation about these connections points to a different effort to impugn Hunter Biden as being linked back to Russia. The House Republicans leading the impeachment inquiry, including Oversight and Accountability Chairman James Comer and Judiciary Chair Jim Jordan, had repeatedly hyped the bribery allegation as a central element of their probe. The implosion left them scrambling and parsing words, with Comer responsible more than any other person on Capitol Hill for elevating this allegation, telling Newsmax on Wednesday that the informant himself wasn't an important part of the investigation somehow. Jordan, meanwhile, was an unwitting participant in a clip shared widely on social media the same day. That's the one of him saying it doesn't change the fundamental facts. And being interviewed at the time then by Manu Raju, Raju follows up by saying, but that's not true. CNN's Manu Raju pressed Jordan on his representations about the bribery allegation. It doesn't change the fundamental four fundamental facts, I guess he's got enumerated. Jordan replied, walking through those four facts about the probe. You said that the 1023 form, right? The 1023 is the most corroborating piece of information you have. Raju then pressed him, referring to the form documenting the informant's allegations. It corroborates, but it doesn't change those fundamental facts, Jordan said. It's not true, Raju said. And both that the substance of the allegation in the 1023 is not true, and it's also not true that it doesn't change the material facts. This seems like a pretty brutal exchange for Jordan, certainly, but only if we gloss over the four facts that Jordan is talking about. Claims that deal not with the first bribery-related thread that was blown apart by the indictment to the informant, but that deal instead with the second thread. The four fundamental, non-changed truths here don't even deal with the bribery allegation. They are about Hunter Biden's Ukrainian business partners. So the gotcha by Raju isn't quite what it seemed. But for all practical purposes, it didn't matter, since the 4 facts thing Jordan likes to do has also been debunked. So, separate debunking, but at least it's been debunked. Let's see what we have to say about it here before the break. He began using this line last year, that there are 4 fundamental facts that show how Joe Biden acted inappropriately while serving as vice president. We've picked this apart previously. The upshot is that it falsely asserts that Joe Biden wanted a Ukrainian official fired to benefit Hunter's business partner. This is the original Burisma claim, which has been debunked repeatedly. It also depends on the idea that Joe Biden made a trip to Ukraine after a call from Hunter Biden, a call that probably wasn't made to Joe Biden at all, or came days after Biden had already announced the trip. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's see if we can get through some more of this Philip Bump piece here. As we left off, we were reading that one of the big problems here, not Joe Biden, but Jim Jordan and his standby line about it doesn't change the underlying facts or the material facts, and that there are 4 fundamental facts, right, about something, yada, yada, blah, 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 but they only apply really to the original claim, which itself has been debunked many times, that there was this effort the whole overarching story of having Hunter Biden on the Burisma board for the purposes of being able to leverage his father, Joe Biden, into not making trouble or trying to help eliminate the prosecutor who was supposedly going to make trouble for Burisma, which, as it turns out, the reason that the international community actually wanted this prosecutor kicked out was that he wasn't enforcing the laws of Ukraine and was in fact corrupt. And to some extent, that might have included that maybe he should have been pursuing charges against Burisma and wasn't. But the idea that they needed this prosecutor fired so that he didn't pursue charges against Burisma, well, he wasn't. Actually, firing him and replacing him with somebody else would probably have resulted in charges against Burisma. It's probably the best thing to do to keep this corrupt prosecutor in place from Burisma's standpoint. And yet it was Joe Biden's policy because it was America's policy, and it was America's policy because it was the international policy to demand the firing of the prosecutor, Shokin, from his position in Ukraine. So it never made any sense, even at the start. But where were we? That was, so the Manu Raju, though he was pointing out how ridiculous it was to say that the material facts hadn't changed, he also I guess what Philip's trying to point out here is, well, the discrediting of the FBI informant doesn't actually bear on the Burisma wanting the prosecutor fired side of the story. But it's debunked all on its own and has been debunked numerous times on its own anyway. So yeah, that is a bit of nuance. Probably important to keep in mind. So where were we here? Right. First of all, the claim falsely asserts that Joe Biden wanted Ukrainian officials, in particular the prosecutor, fired in order to benefit Hunter's business partner. That's been debunked. It also, the whole idea depends on the idea that Biden had made a trip, Joe Biden, that is, to Ukraine after a call from Hunter Biden. One, probably no, that wasn't made. And if it was, that there was a call that came days after Biden had already announced his trip there. So in other words, Jordan's efforts to deflect Raju's question about the collapse of the bribery claim centered on raising another debunked allegation against Biden. So it doesn't change the four fundamental facts of some other case. Yes, that's true. It doesn't change those facts, but as it happens, that doesn't matter because those facts, one, aren't the ones that are actually claimed to have been debunked by this indictment, but rather they've been debunked in the past anyway. And, you know, I guess it would be like saying, well, we charged this one person with bank robbery. And as it turns out, the allegation of bank robbery against this person was a lie. Well, that doesn't change the fact that we've previously said that that person should be on trial for murder. Well, no, it doesn't. But then, as it happens, do you remember that 15 times in the past everybody said, no, he's actually got nothing to do with that murder? Like, okay. So, yeah, well, this whole debunking of the claim against him for bribery doesn't mean he's not guilty of murder. No, it doesn't. His not being guilty of murder is what takes care of that thing. I don't know why you're confusing the two. So, I don't know if that really clears anything up, but that's actually, I mean, it really is a good illustration of just what the Republican plan is here, just to muddy the waters so much that people are just generally like, well, I don't really know. I can't tell the difference between the things which Republicans claim Joe Biden is guilty of. I'm so confused about all of that. And maybe it's purposeful. That may be the case given that Jonathan Turley has apparently, has arrived back on the scene and is doing the same sort of active confusion of everything in the hopes of just making Joe Biden look bad. Maybe we'll get to that next too. All right, but Philip Bump continues another aside in his write-up here. Technically, Kevin McCarthy's framing of Joe Biden's purported involvement with Hunter's Ukrainian partners focused on an email exchange between someone in Biden's office and a colleague of his son's. But in an abundance of graciousness, we have updated the allegation to match his ally's current position. Okay. Then there's the third thread, this broad argument that Joe Biden has been a quiet or hidden partner with his son and his brother now, James Biden. Most of the energy that Republicans have invested in the impeachment investigation is centered on finding some proof that Joe Biden benefited from his family's business. And the results? They have got no more evidence than they did 14 months ago. That is to say, still zero. Sure, they documented that Hunter Biden leveraged his family name as an income stream. They learned that on some occasions when Joe Biden would call his son would be in meetings with business partners and put him on the speakerphone. They learned that both Hunter's business and James Biden personally had paid Joe Biden thousands of dollars, but that, it turns out, was money that was demonstrably in repayment of loans. So no actual benefit there. They have also heard from witnesses testifying under penalty of perjury that Biden wasn't involved in the business. Over and over and over, the same refrain. The most recent person to state that was James Biden himself, testifying behind closed doors on Capitol Hill on Wednesday. I have had a 50-year career in a variety of business ventures, he said in his opening statement. Joe Biden has never had any involvement or direct or indirect financial interest in those activities. None. He joins every other interviewed participant in those business activities in rejecting the idea that Joe Biden was involved. Devin Archer, Eric Schwerin, James Gilliard, even names I don't even recognize at this point. Even Anthony Bobulinski, who in 2020 joined campaign events for former President Donald Trump, was unable to show any evidence that Biden had been involved in the business. The important point here is that Republicans are correct when they say that the collapse of the bribery allegation does not by itself derail the entirety of their impeachment probe, because they're making up other charges to impeach him on. The probe has also been derailed by their failure to find evidence of wrongdoing. There are discrete elements here that stand alone, or, as the case happens to be, collapse independently. Put another way, it is not the FBI's informant's fault that the effort to impeach Biden is turning into an embarrassment for Republicans. It's their fault. That is, all of their Republican impeachment claims before the collapse of this informant story were false and easily debunked, and had in fact been debunked, were baseless. Now, it turns out that one of them is even more obviously and embarrassingly debunked. That's basically what he's saying here, I think. Okay, so whatever, they want to cling to it. But, this is where they're muddying the waters, comes back to bite them. People were purposely being confused by Republicans. They were sowing this sort of misinformation about all of these charges being interrelated. And so when one of them explodes in an indictment, it should surprise no one that they all go down this way, even if in an abundance of caution and fairness, you decide you want to parse as between them. It's always good to get to the truth, and Bump should do that. That's the role he's playing here. But I'm certainly not going to shed any tears over confusion leading the general public to believe that all the charges against Biden have been debunked by this indictment. This was your plan, that they would all hang together, and people would purposefully be led to confuse each of the charges with one another. And then if one of them explodes, now they will confusedly believe that all of them have exploded. Oh, well, that is so sad for you people. Okay, let's see. There's another Philip Bump thing that I'm holding on to. But then there's also, let's see. Is this Bump? No, as a matter of fact, it's not. Although it wouldn't surprise me if there was another one out there somewhere. Not certain that I can track it down right now. But there's a companion-ish piece here that has more to do, I think, with this overarching case. Glenn Kessler, actually having written this up on last Friday, how a Bill Barr, quote, assignment led to a Biden impeachment effort based on a lie. Well, we know all about the Biden impeachment effort based on a lie. And we've heard about Bill Barr's involvement, but maybe it's time to take a closer look at it with Glenn Kessler's help. Let's see. It begins up here at the top with a pull quote from former U.S. Attorney Scott Brady, whose name we've heard a lot lately, in an interview with congressional investigators on October 23rd of last year. And the quote here is, "We were not making a representation that everything in this 1023 report was credible." Okay, let's see how that's important. The indictment of Alexander Smirnov, a trusted FBI confidential source, wink, wink, on charges of lying about an alleged Ukrainian bribery scheme involving President Biden and his son Hunter, is a new twist in a saga that has its roots in a project launched by then Attorney General William P. Barr, soon after President Donald Trump was impeached for the first time. Trump was impeached, you'll recall, of course, over the Ukraine stuff, on December 18th, 2019, charged with pressuring the Ukrainian government to turn up dirt on Biden, potentially his most formidable rival in 2020, and yeah, he was. 16 days later, on January 3rd, 2020, Barr tasked Brady, the U.S. Attorney in Western Pennsylvania, with vetting material regarding Biden and Ukraine, some of it supplied by Trump attorney Rudy Giuliani, for possible distribution to prosecutors who could use a grand jury to investigate further. To some extent, this story mirrors that of the Steele dossier. You remember that? A string of unverified and derogatory pieces of information on Trump collected during the 2016 election by a confidential source trusted by the FBI, Christopher Steele, on behalf of Hillary Clinton's campaign, eventually anyway, and the Democratic National Committee. Steele's reports, leaked to the media, created a firestorm of speculation by Democrats about Trump's ties to Russia, even though much of it turned out to be false. Although that's open to more interpretation these days. Steele has said that he stands by his work. And, of course, this, too, was another opportunity for Republicans to muddy the waters. Some of it might have ended up being not true, but they were hoping that they could muddy the waters enough such that you would then believe that all assertions tying Trump to Russia were untrue. And that was, stretching the truth, to say the least. Anyway, by the way, it is an interesting mirror, right? The Steele dossier and this Smirnov allegation. But note one major difference. Steele was indicted 0 times for this, and not so for Smirnov. Somehow that has come out differently. That is weird. Anyway, in the same vein, the Smirnov tale has its roots in a Republican effort to target Biden. His story didn't gain much traction among investigators in 2020, but emerged in 2023 and was immediately embraced as true by many GOP lawmakers. A detailed review of information contained in the indictment, Brady's testimony before congressional investigators, public statements, and other documents shows that absent Barr's creation of a Biden task force, Smirnov's allegations probably never would have appeared in the FBI document that led to his indictment and to the possible collapse of the Republicans' impeachment case with Smirnov as its star. Barr spoke briefly to the fact-checker, that's Kessler, off the record, before hanging up the phone. Here is a timeline of the years-long events ending in Smirnov's arrest. It's guess important to put this on the background here. First mention of meeting with Burisma CEO is the first section here. March 1st, 2017. Smirnov, an FBI source since 2010, speaks to his FBI handler as part of a routine communication. He says that in the previous month, he had a discussion with Mykola Zlochevsky, the chief executive of the Ukrainian gas firm Burisma, about possibly acquiring a U.S.-based petroleum firm. As an aside, he mentions that Hunter Biden is on the Burisma board. He makes no mention of an alleged bribe to the Bidens. The report of the conversation, known as an FD 1023, is filed away. That's March of 2017. Next up, a discreet assignment to vet Giuliani claims. December 18th, 2019. So this is, we've skipped from March 2017 now to December 2019. Trump is impeached in the House, accused of having dangled favors to the Ukrainian government if it would announce an investigation of Biden. The impeachment probe uncovered how Trump had urged Giuliani to put pressure on the Ukrainians to target Biden. Then, January 3rd, 2020, among other things that is going on at that point, we're beginning the election year. In an email, Brady is informed that Barr and Deputy Attorney General Jeffrey Rosen want him, Brady is informed, that Barr and Rosen want him to undertake a discreet assignment. Brady later told congressional investigators that we were to take information provided by the public, including Mayor Giuliani, relating to Ukrainian corruption. And we were to vet that, and that was how we described it internally, a vetting process. He said he personally briefed Barr about his progress twice. January 29th of that year, Giuliani is interviewed by Brady and his team at the FBI's Pittsburgh office. There were a lot of names, which included details allegedly derived from these people, including bank account numbers, email addresses, cell phones that would purportedly point toward evidence, Brady recalled. There was information about a variety of schemes and accusations not limited to Burisma and Joe Biden. February 9th, Lindsey Graham tells CBS's Face the Nation that he has been told by Barr that the Justice Department has, quote, created a process that Rudy could give information and they would see if it's verified. February 10th, Barr confirms to reporters that the Justice Department has such a project underway. The DOJ has the obligation to have an open door to anybody who wishes to provide us information that they think is relevant, Barr says. But as I did say to Senator Graham, we have to be very careful with respect to any information coming from Ukraine. Then in March of 2020, the coronavirus pandemic forces investigators to work remotely, delaying progress. At the end of the month, the FBI opens an assessment, a step before taking information to a grand jury. Brady said that for his team to keep investigating, the FBI assessment needed to be renewed every 30 days, requiring 17 sign-offs at headquarters, and agents would stop working if the renewal lapsed. The agents would go pens down for weeks at a time, he said, and so that was incredibly frustrating. Then from March to May of 2020, at Brady's request, the FBI searches in its files for Burisma and related search terms because of information received from Giuliani. Burisma appeared in a lot of the material we received from Mr. Giuliani, Brady said. May 19th, Smirnov texts his FBI handler about the release of edited fragments of private phone calls between Biden and a former Ukrainian president, Andrei Derkach, a Ukrainian lawmaker. I guess did he move from the presidency into the parliament? Or let me see if we can read that again. Calls between Biden and a former Ukrainian president. Okay. So what we're looking at is edited fragments of private phone calls between Biden and a former Ukrainian president, unnamed here. And those fragments are released or circulated by Andrei Derkach, who is a Ukrainian lawmaker. That makes more sense. Smells bad for Biden, Smirnov writes. Derkach, an independent member of Ukraine's parliament who previously aligned with a pro-Russian faction. Remember, we were talking about that last week and how weird it was that there were so many pro-Russian members of the Ukrainian parliament, but maybe it's not that weird considering how many pro-Russian members of the United States Congress we are now stuck with. Right. I knew I'd heard Derkach's name before, but not in the context of being Ukrainian president. No. Another former Ukrainian president, not Zelensky, prior to Zelensky, has a conversation with Biden about something, and Andrei Derkach says it smells bad for Biden. Okay. Donald Trump Jr., the president's son, posts one of those recordings on Twitter hours later and implies impropriety by Biden. Smirnov suggests Biden is going to jail and mentions a possible bribe. His handler expresses doubt, saying the claim only makes sense if you believe the story that Biden pushed out Ukraine's top prosecutor to assist Burisma, which which all accounts, according to this guy, says it was not. Okay, it's kind of a garbled transmission here. There's a sick attached to it. Anyway, indeed, this was a false narrative promoted by Trump that Biden pushed out the Ukrainian prosecutor to help Burisma, as opposed to the whole world wanted him gone. For sure, yes, Smirnov replies. I'll try to prove to you, bro. He says to I don't know who. His handler. Okay. Now, next up, the 2017 report is discovered. In early June, the 2017 interview with Smirnov is found by FBI Pittsburgh during its searches, and this is June of 2020 that they're looking through their files. They find this 2017 interview with Smirnov, and it's in a Washington field office file now because of the Burisma keyword search, which has flagged it to Brady's team. For about 20 days, Brady says, FBI officials resist asking the handler to contact the source about the reference. Brady said his impression was the FBI was trying to protect Smirnov so that they could continue to use him as a source. June 26th rolls around. FBI Pittsburgh asks the handler again to contact Smirnov. That same day, he telephones Smirnov. This time, the indictment says, Smirnov said he met and spoke with Zlochevsky in 2015 and or 16, mentioning specific locations such as Vienna, and he was told Biden and his son had each been paid $5 million to oust the prosecutor and protect Burisma. It is unclear why neither Smirnov nor the handler followed up on the May text exchange until prodded by Brady's team. The indictment says this story was a fabrication. June 30th, 2020. The handler's account of the interview is memorialized on a Form 1023, an official record of the FBI, and finalized. Brady's team reviews it and confirms that it was sent to the Baltimore FBI field office and the U.S. Attorney for Delaware, David Weiss. July and August of 2020. To vet Smirnov's claims, the FBI Pittsburgh office asks him for his travel records, which the indictment says he provided. The FBI then, quote, concluded that all reasonable steps had been completed regarding the defendant's allegations, unquote, and that the assessment of his claims should be closed. The indictment does not indicate whether Smirnov's travel was confirmed, but in his testimony, Brady suggested it was. We attempted to use open source material to check against what was stated in the 1023, Brady said. We also interfaced with the CHS's handler, confidential human sources handler, about certain statements relating to travel and meetings to see if they were consistent with his or her understanding. What we were able to identify, we found that it was consistent, and so we felt that there was sufficient indicia of credibility in this 1023 to pass it on to an office that had a predicated grand jury investigation. Curiously, Brady's lawyer interrupted the congressional interview to prevent Brady from answering specific questions about what the travel records showed. He would not even let him say whether the travel records showed Smirnov had traveled to the locations mentioned in the FBI reports. That seems a little odd. Then, August 12th, 2020, the FBI Pittsburgh office is informed that senior officials agree the matter should be closed, the indictment says. September 3rd, the FBI assessment is officially closed, according to a letter written in October of 2023 by Senator Chuck Grassley. September 21st, Brady submits a report titled Vetting to a senior Justice Department official, Richard Donahue. The Grassley letter says, we summarize some of the allegations that have been brought or alleged by Mr. Giuliani and noted where there was either we had no basis of opining or there was conflicting information, Brady said. Mid-October, I don't know if this is clarifying anything or not, but mid-October 2020, Trump calls Barr and inquires about the investigation into Hunter Biden, which he shouldn't be doing, whose laptop contents had been disseminated by Giuliani. Barr, in his memoir, says he yelled, "Damn it, Mr. President, I am not going to talk to you about Hunter Biden, period." I guess he agrees that should not have happened. October 23rd, Brady and FBI agents brief Weiss's office on his findings. Mind you, this is October 23rd, 2020, like just days before the actual election. People are already early voting, yada, yada. We could only present what we had identified, explain to them the sources by which we believed something had indicia of credibility, and then make recommendations about what we think they might want to do with that, Brady said. With the conclusion of the briefing, Brady's tasking ends. We pulled up stakes and folded our tent and went on to other things. Of course, folding up your tent on October 23rd, just before the election. And then the next entry in this is November 3rd. Trump loses re-election to Biden. Womp womp. Nothing worked, but they had pulled up their tent stakes. December 27th, now way post-election and just before the riot. In a conversation with Donahue and Rosen about his efforts to challenge the election results, Trump presses for the special counsel to investigate the Bidens. You figure out what to do with Hunter Biden, Trump said, according to Donahue's notes and testimony he gave to Congress. That's up to you guys, but, quote, people will criticize the DOJ if Hunter's not investigated for real. This is a little late to be bringing this up in the game, don't you think? Yes. All right. Also a little bit late in starting our exit music here. The next section, and maybe the last one we'll be able to mention here, the 2020 report catches the attention of Congress. We're now in late post-election 2020, we're way past it. We're in 2022 now. I guess everything kind of comes to a rest. There's a riot at the Capitol. We're investigating that. Trump is forging electoral college certificates. Maybe we should take a look at that. In 2022, late 2022, November, Trump announces that he will run for president again. And then nothing else happens until May of 2023 is our next entry here. Grassley and Comer release a letter, earlier described, right? Or earlier mentioned, to the Justice Department and the FBI saying that they have learned that agencies possessed an unclassified FD 1023 form that describes an alleged criminal scheme involving then Vice President Biden and a foreign national relating to the exchange of money for policy decisions. They say it's unclear what efforts were made to investigate the allegation, except that there was an investigation, and they said, forget it, screw it, the whole thing is stupid, the election is coming, Trump's about to lose, let's give up on it, and then they did. But, well, years later, when they were going to have a rematch, Grassley discovers this. It's been discovered in the files. We have to have an investigation.
NetworksRadio.com. Well, no, you have been listening to Kagro in the morning with David Waldman.
All right. Well, you know, Glenn Kessler, he's a fact checker. This is why he laid it out this way. He could have done some digestion of the facts for us. That might have helped. Anyway, it filled our time anyhow, and it's all going to be important. It's best that it all be on the record. And now, though, we hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy and a wrap-up of, you know, other stories.